Feedback is everywhere. It's in our work, our relationships, even casual conversations. But why does it feel like it doesn't always lead to growth? Think about the last time someone gave you some advice. Did you use it, or did it fade into the background? Reflection is the missing link in making feedback meaningful. We often focus on receiving feedback, but the real transformation happens after we take time to reflect on it. And that's hard to do because feedback can feel overwhelming sometimes or unclear. People don't know how to turn feedback into actionable steps. So today I want to talk about why reflection matters and a few steps to turn feedback into growth. So let's start by building the case for why reflection is critical to growth. Reflection bridges the gap between feedback and action. It helps clarify what's actionable from what's not. It helps you figure out which elements from the feedback matter and which don't, and why. You have to think of feedback as like seeds in a garden. It's reflection that waters them and helps them grow. And by the way, if you're looking for tools to guide your reflection process or personalized strategies to navigate your feedback journey, check out my free resources at the Explorer's Edge or sign up for one-on-one coaching. You'll find links in the description below. So let's talk about the 3 steps to turn feedback into growth. We want to provide a simple, actionable framework that you can follow. We've got 3 steps. Step 1 is pause. Step 2 is reframe. Step 3 is to plan. So step 1 is to pause. And what does that mean? It means to create space to process feedback. So after receiving feedback, give yourself 24 hours to process the feedback that you've received. And that can sometimes be hard to do because we might just want to shove it way down, push it way down and like ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist because sometimes feedback is hard to process. And we talked about that in the last video. But instead of reacting immediately or getting angry at the person who's giving you feedback, just wait. Just wait 24 hours to give yourself that time to reflect and ask yourself, what's the main point here? And is there any truth to it? And that's it. That's the whole point of step 1. Is there any truth to what they said? And what's the main point of what they're trying to convey? Because as we talked about in the last video, it's not always easy to convey effective feedback. It's often as hard to give it as it is to receive it. So let's talk about step 2, which is reframe. Reframe means to look at the feedback from a growth mindset. So what's a growth mindset? Growth mindset means it's the opposite of a fixed mindset. If you want to know more about this, you can look up the work of Carol Dweck. Don't know the title of her work, but you can just Google her name. She's like the growth mindset lady. Her last name, Dweck, W-E-C-K. And you want to look at growth mindset from a perspective of a central belief that you are capable of change if you are so willing. You want to identify what's actionable in the feedback versus what's just merely opinion-based. And you want to reframe criticism from how can this help me to thinking about how can this help me improve or understand myself better, right? How can this help me improve or understand myself better? And then using that feedback then to find a way forward, which leads us into step 3, which is to plan. And planning, simply means turning your insights into action. Break it up into 1 or 2 steps that you can commit to. What's something I can do today to make this change towards a more positive action? If the feedback is about being too rushed, for example, you might plan 1 moment in the day to intentionally slow down. Give yourself a 5-minute meditation or 5 minutes to just sit in your car and just breathe and focus on your breath and not be rushed by emails or to-dos or deadlines or got to pick up kids or run them to soccer practice. Give yourself 5 minutes to just not be rushed. I want to close this with a story from my own experience. I remember giving a workshop to a group of teachers on how to incorporate active learning strategies into their classrooms. And I was really passionate about the subject. But during the Q&A, one participant said, "This is really interesting, but it felt more like a lecture. I wish we had more time to practice the strategies ourselves." And that comment really stuck with me. I felt disheartened because I had put my whole heart and soul into this training session. But instead of brushing it off as just one person's opinion, I gave myself time to sit with the feedback. What had gone well, what hadn't. I mean, I had planned this thing to the nines, right? I had the full plan of, learning objectives, PowerPoint, and X, Y, and Z. I had all the bells and whistles. Everything was planned. I had worked on it for weeks leading up to the training session. And so when I finally sat down and processed the emotions and the logic of the teacher's feedback, I really asked myself what had gone well and what hadn't, right? And so I revisited my goals for the workshop, and I realized it wasn't about showing them what to do, but helping them to experience it directly. And I asked myself, how can I make this feel more hands-on and practical next time? So that's my reframe, right? I gave myself space to process. I didn't feel good about the feedback. I knew it was probably some truth to it. And so I reframed it. I asked myself, how can I make this feel more hands-on and practical next time? How can I take what that person requested and implement it in my next training session? I realized I'd been so focused on delivering my knowledge that I hadn't created enough space for interaction. And I began to see that feedback was not criticism, that those two things are different things. And it provided insight into how to better serve my audience. So in my next workshop, I used a think, pair, share model, and I delivered the content in shorter bursts and guided the participants in a role-playing strategy with a peer. And afterwards, the feedback was overwhelmingly contrasted. It was very different. It was extraordinarily positive. And the best part was that the participants left not just feeling informed, but feeling confident in applying what they'd learned, right? So their feeling had changed, and that was paramount. That was critical. So, feedback alone won't create change. Giving feedback to an employee who doesn't take it does not ensure change. If you are that employee or that spouse or that partner or whatever, when you take time to pause and reframe and then plan to implement the feedback, you can transform that feedback into meaningful growth. That's how we grow. Right? So if this resonates with you and you want to improve your ability to turn feedback into action and growth, check out my resources linked below and visit Explorer's Edge to learn more about my one-on-one coaching services. And I've designed these tools specifically to help you take actionable steps toward meaningful change. I want to hear from you. What's one piece of feedback that you've received lately? Take a moment to reflect, reframe, act on it, and then share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more strategies on curiosity, growth, and learning. And I will see you next time right here on Explorer's Edge.